right, cool. I only get 45 minutes with you this morning on the big stage, so I'm excited about that. Let's just dive right in. We're going to be talking about deeper learning and equity this morning. But I just want to let you know that you can follow along. You can download slides. Everything I do today is all at this web address, bit.ly/2022 Lynchburg, lowercase. And I will give that to you again at the end of this keynote, just so that you have that, all right? As Aaron mentioned, I'm a professor at University of Colorado, Denver campus, not Boulder campus. Most of you know Boulder. That's where the big football team is and the mountains and all that. We're downtown because all the school leaders got tired of driving up to Boulder for their doctorates. And I'm also the director of a center called CASTLE, as Aaron mentioned, but not the CASTLE you know, the Social Emotional Learning CASTLE. This is CASTLE. It's been around since 2005. We're the only university center in the country that's focused on leadership, innovation, technology, deeper learning, all the good stuff, right? Okay, so this is going to be a very interactive keynote. You're going to have opportunities to talk with your neighbors. So look, you're going to need a discussion buddy if you're sitting by yourself. So look around and figure out who you're going to talk to, and maybe more importantly, who you're not going to talk to. Go. If you're sitting with your friends, say hi. If you're sitting near somebody you don't know, make a new friend. You're going to need a discussion buddy, my friend. You're going to need a discussion buddy, friend. Find your discussion buddies. All right, and we're back in 3, 2, 1. Let's rock it. Okay, so this morning we're going to go through a conversation in 3 short acts. Act 1, we're going to talk about relevance gaps. Act 2, we're going to talk about deeper learning. Act 3, we're going to talk about the equity concerns that go with that. Everybody got it? 1, 2, 3. It's going to be easy. We're going to start right away with relevance gaps. Woo! All right, relevance gaps. So what Aaron didn't mention is that I am a Virginia kid. All right? All right? Spent my middle school years in Roanoke. As you can see, I was quite the looker. And I had a chance to work with my home school district, Roanoke County, a little while back. So I grabbed some yearbook pictures, and I discovered that I was in the math club. I did not remember that. Right? How many of you have forgotten so much of middle school because you just needed to? That was me. Right? Okay, so there I am, second from the left, front row, rocking the plaid, looking sharp. But one of the things that I love about this photo, right, is that good old Mr. Johnston up in the corner, who's like, Scott, you're a genius, in quotes, which I'm sure was great for my fragile middle school ego, but I also didn't recognize what the quotes meant yet. So, but even better, look at this thing right here, right? This is early 80s, and everybody else in the room is looking at it like, dang, what's that? Except for me, I got this look on my face. Right? And what middle school me didn't know is that the twin forces of technology and globalization were going to upend everything around us over the next 4 decades, right? They were just going to kind of explode everything. And what we're finding, of course, is that as society has changed quite rapidly around us, schools have struggled to keep up, right? So green line here, what our community needs from us, what our graduates need from us, what our students need from us. Red line, what we're actually able to provide as school systems. That creates relevance gaps, right? How do we stay relevant to the needs of society and our kids and so on? So there's lots of different relevance gaps that we can talk about. I'm going to talk about 2 because this is a tech conference, right? And the first one is around information literacy. As you may have noticed, we have a new information landscape. It's online, it's digital, it's small devices, it's portable devices, it's big laptops and desktops, it's everything, right? And the last time we did this to ourselves was when we invented the printing press. Some of you remember when that happened. And so when we invented the printing press, what happened was all of a sudden the common person had access to information for the first time. It didn't have to get filtered, right? Like all of a sudden you could read the Bible by yourself instead of having to rely on the word of the local priest. All of a sudden you could read the law for yourself instead of being dependent on the messenger of the king. And that seems like a relatively small thing, like conceptually, but it like blew up Europe, right? Like it toppled governments, it created new branches of religion, like all the things, right? And now, of course, we have even more access to information than we ever had before. And one of the things we know as educators is that our students are really, really bad at navigating this space. In other words, they have no idea what's valid, what's credible, what's reliable, what's trustworthy, right? We have all kinds of research that shows that information literacy in our young people needs some work. And guess what? We adults are even worse. In fact, the research shows that the older you are, the more likely you are to share misinformation and share stuff that just flat out isn't true, right? And so we have an information literacy problem in this country. And it's not just our kids. We can't just point fingers at them because it's us too, right? And so one of the things we have to figure out here is how do we help our kids learn how to navigate these spaces in effective ways? And we don't do that by treating the web like a library shelf, right? One of the things we do as classroom educators is we tend to send kids to the web to look at a web page, look at a video, whatever, right? And then they're done with it. They're like, put it away. It's like putting the book back on the library shelf. And I love this quote by Mitch Resnick from the MIT Media Lab. He says, in the analog world, ink on paper, we would never say that somebody was literate if they could read but not write. So, why are we focused on consumption with our students instead of also focusing on production? When do our kids get to make and create and share and do, right? Because that's an essential component of living in this digital space. Now, some of us are here at this conference because we need to up our skills, right? Like, we can't teach kids how to do this stuff if we don't know how to do it ourselves. And we see those struggles in schools, we see those struggles at homes with parents and so on. Here's the bottom line. What's your name, ma'am? Katie? Katie, what do you do, Katie? Speech therapist, nice. Katie, let's say that you wanted to publish a book, all right? What you would have to do in the old days is you would have to go to the publisher and be like, I got this great idea for a book, and I want you to give me some front money so I can write it, right? And I'm going to be a bazillionaire author, and I'm going to be on the front page, of the newspaper and whatever, right? And the publisher was like, Katie, I don't know. I'm a little skeptical whether your voice is worth publishing, right? And they had to make a decision whether or not Katie was worth publishing. Because it was expensive, right? Like, Katie, think about all the expense with the ink and the paper and the glue and the binding and the book distribution channels and the trucks and the bookstores and the marketing and the ads in the newspaper and the magazines and all the things that we needed to write and the book tours that you would go on. All of that's expensive, right? And so we had to make sure that your voice was worth elevating and the cost of printing before we decided you could have that book and be an author, right? And if you navigated all those hurdles, then, Katie, you got anointed as an expert. Because dang, you wrote a book, right? There you are on the cover. It's pretty awesome. And the rest of us just consumed those authors that made it through the hurdles. And whether it was a book or a newspaper or a magazine or a radio or a TV show, right? Most of us didn't have the ability to produce and create and share. We were dependent on people like Katie who navigated that space. But now, anybody can publish, right? Anybody at all. That stupid person that lives down the street from you can publish, right? And so that's awesome, right? Because we're elevating all these voices that we never would have heard before, right? The Katies of the world rise up and like, dang, Katie, you're sharing some really awesome content, right? And if Katie wants a book today, she can be up and running in 5 minutes. It's called a blog, right? If she wants a radio station today, she can be up in 3 minutes. It's called a podcast. And if she wants her own television station, she can be up and running in 2 minutes. It's called TikTok or YouTube. Katie, you got a TikTok channel? Oh, you should. Right? Katie, you got to be on the TikTok. All right? And that's wonderful because we're elevating all these voices that never would have surfaced before, and there's a lot of crap out there. Right? And the problem is that nobody's filtering for us anymore because the filtering decision has moved from some big entity like a company or the government to our own heads. And we haven't been trained very well as adults or young people, which is why we're so bad at it. That's relevance gap number one, and it's really, really important because it's driving all kinds of larger issues in our society right now. Here's the second relevance gap that we need to pay attention to. What does it mean to prepare kids for college and career readiness, for life success, right? Let's think about that for a minute. So, what's your name, ma'am? Yeah? What? Brittany, what do you do, Brittany? Teach math? Nice. All right. Brittany, for sake of this argument, let's say that you worked at a factory. In fact, you barely made it out of high school, but you went down the street and you got a job at the local factory and you were making 40, 50 bucks an hour, right? Good benefits, you had a pension, retirement, vacation, all that stuff. And then one day the factory said, hey, Brittany, you're too expensive. We're going to take your $50 an hour job plus benefits and we're going to send it to Bangladesh where they pay people $4 a day and no benefits, if they're lucky. And you lost your job. And that's called offshoring. And we've lost tens of millions of jobs to offshoring in America alone. So Brittany's like, all right, fine. I'll go work at the bank. I always wanted to be in high finance anyway. I'm going to be a bank teller. But the rest of you are so cold and heartless. Yes, I'm looking at you, right? You're so cold and heartless that you'd rather do your banking on the ATM, on your app on your phone, right? And we don't need as many bank tellers. Sorry, Brittany. So Brittany's out of a job because of you. Yes, I'm pointing at you, right? Right? And so then, fine. So Brittany's like, fine, I'm going to be a travel agent, right? I can see it now. Travel Dreams by Brittany, right? But guess what? You are so cold and heartless. You'd rather make your plane reservation on Saturday night at the comfort of your home instead of driving to the Monday morning to go see Brittany at the Travel Dreams, right? And again, she doesn't have a job because of you. And, right? Here's the thing. We're outsourcing work. We're outsourcing work to outside companies like, hey, you used to be in the HR department or the accounting department, and now we're going to contract it out to an outside contractor, right? And, you know, we save money as a company. You don't have a job, but we're saving money, so it's good, right? And we're also automating jobs, right? Brittany, you just got automated by software. You got automated by self-service websites that these people are cold and heartless and use instead of keeping you employed, right? And we're losing jobs to automation in the physical world as well, like those robots that put screws in car doors, right? Instead of human beings, right? And the sum total of all of this, of the offshoring, of the outsourcing, all the automation is tens and tens of millions of jobs over the last few decades, gone. Wiped out. Here's where we're headed. Actually, here's where we are right now, and it's just going to get worse. So this is the Amazon warehouse, moving pallets around. This is a strip mine. There's nobody in there. Same for the tractor. GPS and no driver in sight. This is a dairy farm. You can teach cows to milk themselves. You can run an entire huge dairy farm with like 4 people. Delivering Coors Light from Fort Collins down to Colorado Springs. Beer run. Dang. We used to be able to say to Brittany, Brittany, you're a sweet soul. You're not the sharpest saw in the shed, but you're a sweet soul. And even if you barely made it out of high school, you could always get a job at the local factory. You could always work retail. You could always work construction. You could always drive a truck. You could always, fill in the blank. And we just can't say that as strongly now as we used to be able to, right? And all of this stuff is here right now. It's not at scale yet, but it's on its way, particularly during the pandemic when we had labor shortages and the companies are like, well, we got to figure out how to do our work. So guess what? We're moving in some new directions. Even though unemployment is low right now, long-term trends are a little grim in some ways, right? So if you're involved in any kind of job that requires high-level thinking work, analytical work, interpersonal work, those blue and green lines on the graph, the number of jobs that have been available to you over the past few days have continued to grow steadily. You've got lots of great employment opportunities if you do high-level thinking work. And woo, if you do any kind of manual labor, or you do low-level mental work like bank teller or travel dreams, right? Where you're doing repetitive mental work over and over again, want to make a deposit, want to make a deposit, want to make a deposit, right? Then the number of jobs available to you has declined steadily. This is called the bifurcation of the American economy. The people up top are living a nice, comfortable middle-class life. Everybody else is struggling to get by, often at minimum wage, and just trying to make it through. Okay? So look at this graph another way. What we see is that each of these bars is a decade. So like, for example, those 4 blue bars are 70 to 80, 80 to 90, 90 to 2000, 2016, right? It's not quite a decade, that last one. But what you can see is nice, steady growth, decade by decade, in those professional blue jobs, right? Over on the red side of things, right, what economists call lower skill manual labor jobs, it's worthy work, right? This is like your healthcare worker that you hire for your grandma because she can't take care of herself, and it's really, really important, and we pay that person nothing, right? And so we see a slight bump in some healthcare work, but otherwise kind of stagnant, tiny growth, and that whole middle, again, gone. Those middle skill jobs are just out of here. It's not just in America. This is a hard graph to read, but if you look at it, there's 3 bars for every country. So for example, here's Belgium, small growth in low skill jobs, higher growth in higher skill jobs, upper thinking jobs, middle drops like a stone, every single country. Right, we're seeing this in every developed country in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Israel, Taiwan, Singapore, US, you name it, Canada, the same similar patterns, right? It's not that we're not more productive, right? The combination of people plus machines has made the American economy more productive than it's ever been, that blue line graph. But look what happened in 1980. Internet and personal computers, right there. That's when they started kicking in. And what we had was, we used to have this historical relationship where people's incomes grew hand in hand with the productivity of the nation, and they started splitting right here. That gap gets wider and wider and wider, and people are getting left behind, right? So back to that graph one more time. 40 years, average income has risen 17%. That's not even inflation, right? And you wonder why people are angry politically? Again, it's because they're being left, right? We know exactly what those blue and green lines on the graph looks like. It looks like this stuff. It's that 21st century skills. It's that upper level thinking. It's the things that we're seeing in all your vision and mission statements and profiles of a graduate right now, and so on. That's the stuff that's in the blue and green lines. That's why we're moving those directions, right? Unfortunately, when you walk the halls of most schools and you see what kids do on a day-to-day basis, 80 to 85% is low-level mental work. It's the lowest line on the chart. It's this stuff. Woo, Scott, you're super upbeat. Thanks so much. Time for your discussion, buddy. Turn, make sense of what I just shared with you. I shared 2 relevance gaps, one around information literacy, one around in life and career readiness. The timer's on for 3 minutes. Have a good chat. Go. All right, we're back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Act 1, relevance gaps. Act 2, let's talk about some deeper learning, right? Like that upper level stuff on the graph, right? Okay. So one of the things we know is that kids are absolutely bored out of their minds in school, right? The national data is horrific, right? So like the folks who do the Gallup poll, they survey like almost 1 million kids a year. This is pre-pandemic. Imagine what it looks like after pandemic, right? It's not too bad in 5th grade. 3 out of 4 kids say they're engaged in learning, but we've already lost 1 out of 4 kids at age 10. That's terrible. And then as you move up the grades, middle school, high school, you're lucky if 1 out of 3 kids say, yes, my learning is interesting and engaging. No wonder why. We ask follow-up questions like, are you learning anything interesting? Are you having fun? Are you getting to do what you do best? And the answers routinely are nope, nope, and nope. So the schools I'm working with are focused on 4 big shifts, right? First shift is that shift in cognitive complexity. How would he up kids' day-to-day work? So it's not just factual recall and procedural regurgitation, the stuff that's 80 to 85% of what they typically do in school. And they're getting to be thinkers and problem solvers and collaborators, and they're creative and all that good upper-level thinking stuff that we know they need, the blue and green lines on the chart, right? Second shift is around agency. The cognitive psychologists tell us over and over again that the number 1 factor in human motivation is autonomy. Do you like to be micromanaged? No? Do you like to be micromanaged? Sure you do. No, you don't. Do you like to be micromanaged? I'm not asking you. You're cold and heartless. So, no, nobody likes to be micromanaged, but we micromanage kids all the time, right? Like, think about it. Schools are such low autonomy spaces for young people, right? They're told what to do almost every minute of every day, pre-K all the way through 12th grade. And when they push back, they don't do what we want, right? We bring down the compliance hammer and we punish them academically, we punish them behaviorally, right? Every time a kid says no to us, bam, they get punished. There's no autonomy for kids. They don't ever get to make meaningful choices about what they do and when and how and so on. Not very often. And then we wonder why they push back, why they're bored, why they're disengaged, why they're apathetic. It's because of the system in which they're embedded. We're violating their fundamental human needs because of our needs for control and compliance. But when we give kids more control and ownership, when we give them more voice and choice, we get huge motivation and engagement benefits, and it also allows us to individualize, personalize, differentiate all the good things that we know we need to do for the diversity of humanity that walks through our doors every day. Third big shift is around authentic work, right? Kids walk in, they're like, why do I need to know this? Why do I care? What meaning and relevance does it have to me? Ever, never, right? And when we start connecting kids' learning to spaces outside of school, our local community, online communities, global communities, they stop asking those questions because they find the meaning and relevance in the tasks that are being put before them. The fourth shift is the shift we'll hear about today. It's around tech infusion, right? We want our kids to be information literate. We want our kids to be tech fluent, but it's not tech for tech's sake. It's because technology is a powerful lever for those first three. We can do different kinds of thinking work. We can give kids agency. We can have them do real-world stuff better and easier and more powerfully with tech than we can without. And that's what this conference should be about. And that's what should be in your mind as you go from session to session, is how do we use tech to make awesome stuff happen, not just move documents around in Google Classroom or Schoology, right? Was that a guilty smile? Just checking. So let's talk about 3 stories from Colorado. I'm just going to share some stuff that's been happening in my home state, right? Some I ended up from Virginia, Colorado. It's really lovely out there, just letting you know. Story number 1 is about sharks. You're like, sharks? Dang. All right, now watch this video for a sec. There are no sharks in Colorado, just saying. All right, I got a question for you. And the question is not, would you get in the cage? The question is, how long was the shark? Now that's an interesting question, right? Like that shark's moving around, there's no easy reference points, the water is murky, you're in the cage, you can't even get close to the shark if you wanted. You'd be like, hold still while I measure you, right? So, with your buddies, you got 45 seconds. How might you measure the shark? Go. What ideas do you have? All right, we're back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So a marine biologist in Boulder, Colorado, she works for an organization called Oceans First, had this issue and she needed it solved, and she turned to some local high school kids in a nearby town, and this is the device they came up with. Now it's upside down. The handle's actually pointing up. What you see on the ends are lasers, right? Lasers, sharks, lasers, good stuff, right? And there's also a GoPro mount where you can put a GoPro camera. And so, you hold it by the handle, the GoPro camera's on top, it's calibrating. So what students figured out was that you could calibrate this device on scale models of sharks, like in the school building on the wall and whatever. And then they shipped it down the ocean. And then when the shark is swimming around, what you can do is the camera's videoing, you can grab a still shot, and when you think it's at its longest, right, then you can capture the endpoints, measure the length, and off you go. Works like a charm. High school kids, right? Not even like your A kids, like your C- kids, right? Doing good stuff, right? Story number 2 is about frogs. So this is, what? What do you mean? Oh, how long is the shark? I have no idea. My friend, focus on process, not product. Okay? Story number 2 is about frogs. This is Lake Titicaca in Peru. It's a high-altitude lake. It's about 12,500 feet above sea level. It's absolutely lovely. This is like Colorado height, right? Like now we're talking like some serious elevation, right? And unfortunately, the wild frog population there has declined 80% over the last 3 generations. It's now classified as critically endangered. So some scientists at the Denver Zoo are working with colleagues in Peru trying to preserve the species. Now, one of the challenges is that it's really hard to collect data on the aquatic environment that the frogs live in because most of our compression tables for scuba diving are calibrated for sea level, right? Because that's where most people scuba. So as you go up in elevation, you have danger of gas continuing to accumulate in your tissues. So the general rule for diving at altitude is dive shallow and dive short, like you don't stay under very long, which makes it really hard to collect data under the water, right? So anyway, the scientists at the Denver Zoo heard about the shark project and were like, hey, maybe some kids could help us with this. And the next thing you know, the school district has an aquatic robotics program, right? They have this giant fish tank where they test their stuff, and they're testing not only surface level robots like this one here with the yellow and red pontoon, but they're also testing submersible robots like this white one right here. They go down underwater and collect data and so on. It's pretty boss. Now, this is not just a like STEM engineering math science project. They're also working on conservation messaging with the locals about why they should care about the frogs, how to preserve them, and so on, including a Spanish language comic book, right, about how to preserve this. So it's writing, it's social studies, it's culture, it's math and science. And one of the things I love about this project is that the school district, about a third of it is sort of like low-income Latino families, and they always view these kids as challenges. But these kids are rocking it on this project, and their Spanish language speaking status is an asset as they communicate with the scientists down in Peru to troubleshoot the robot, right? Like all of a sudden, they're the experts, and they can talk with the scientists. It's boss. So anyway, so that's story number 2. Story number 3 is about space. If you drive west of Denver, you might run into this kid at Lakewood High School. You can see that he and his team have created this harness, right, from scratch. It's made out of water repellent materials as much as possible because we don't want them to absorb perspiration. And what they're trying to figure out here is how do astronauts stay fit in space? Interesting challenge. You can't just like take a big weight set and take it up right to the space because every gram counts. And it's not like you have a bunch of room on the International Space Station. You can't be like, hey, we're going to put a mile-long track. We're going to run around it, right? So what his team latched on to this idea is that resistance training, right? And so what you might see is you have this strap, you have different clips on the harness in different places. There's a strap that goes through his legs and up the back. There's a D-ring attached to it. And he's demonstrating how you might take a tension cable attached to the floor or the ceiling or the wall and attach it to a piece of the harness, right? And then you can do your resistance training and stay buff up in space, which is important. So Lakewood High School is part of NASA's Hunch program, where students work on real-life problems connected to the space program, right? And every year, they work on different projects. They fly kids down to Houston. They make their pitch to NASA, and they've had tremendous success. They've had multiple projects make it up to the International Space Station. Not bad for some high schoolers, right? Here's another project from another group. You see they're working on this sort of like collapsible metal fabric bucket, right? So it collapses flat, pull it out. They're trying to figure out how do you keep clothes clean up in space when you don't really have a lot of water. So you can see this is like their t-shirt washer, right? And they're prototyping different solutions. They're testing bacteria and basically trying to figure out titanium dioxide, ultraviolet radiation, like 10 milliliters of water. Could we wash a t-shirt in this device? That, my friends, is deeper learning. 3 stories from Colorado. What did you notice? What do you wonder? What ideas does this spark? Have a good conversation. Your tea timer's on. Go. All right, and we're back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Act 1, relevance gaps. Act 2, deeper learning. Act 3, let's talk about equity. We're coming out of the pandemic, and one of the dominant rhetorics that we're hearing from policymakers, from school leaders, from communities, and so on is learning loss, learning loss, learning loss, learning loss. It's this stuff, right? The lowest level on the chart. The stuff that kids spend 80 to 85% of their classroom work on. Doesn't exactly make them competitive for the global economy, doesn't exactly make them super college ready or life success. Nobody's hiring regurgitators. Hey, we got a job opening. Are you a good regurgitator? That's what we could use. And we're so focused on that lower level stuff and on the SOLs and on catching up on these standardized assessments that we create these blocks of time in schools. They might be called your focused instructional time, FIT. Might be called, even better, what I need, the win block, right? And you know what happens during this time? We know exactly what happens during this time. Some kids get to go do cool stuff. They get to build rockets, they get to play with robots, right? They're coding and designing apps and websites, they're learning multimedia skills and doing social media interning and online production and all the cool stuff, right? But not you. Not you. What's your name, ma'am? Jerry. You're behind, Jerry. So we got to catch you up because learning loss, right? So what you need, Jerry, is you need to sit in front of a computer and do some self-paced learning software, right? What you need, Jerry, is you need both literacy work and numeracy work. You're going to do a double dose of self-paced computer work. You're going to get individual tutoring. You're going to get more direct instruction by your teacher. Oh, sorry, you might have to, skip recess occasionally or whatever, right? So that's what Jerry gets, right? And what we know over and over again is that it's the same kids. Jerry's never gets to build rockets. She never gets to play with robots. Jerry, during the fit block or the win period, is always, always, always in intervention and remediation. And we know who the Jerrys are in our schools. They're the same kids they've always been, right? The kids who live in poverty, the kids for whom English is not their primary language, the kids of color, the kids who have a disability. They always get stuck in the fit block and the win block. So some kids, like you get to build rockets and robots. You get to catch up. And you never get to experience those life-ready opportunities that prepare you for this complex world that we now live in. You never get deeper learning, Jerry, and I'm really sorry. One of the critical questions we have to figure out over the next few years is how do we make sure we guarantee equity of access to deeper learning opportunities for every kid, not just some kids. It's not our job as schools to prepare corporate worker bees. At the same time, don't you want your kids and your nieces and nephews and your grandkids to have access to a steady job, to have a decent income, to be able to afford a vacation or retirement and whatever, right? We have to give our kids the skills they need to survive and thrive. And it's not recall and regurgitation, no matter what the rhetoric is around learning loss. That's the moral imperative around deeper learning. That's the equity imperative around deeper learning. Carlos Moreno, the executive director of Big Picture Learning, says innovation work is equity work these days. You've got these 5 C's. They're meant to get kids to be life ready. And if we don't figure it out for every kid, then some kids are going to be left behind as we figure out how do we work towards these relevance gaps. One last chat with your neighbor. Tea timer's on for a couple minutes. Who is being left behind in your school system when it comes to deeper learning? Have a good chat. All right, we're back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Shh. All right, friends, let's wrap it up. So, just some general reminders as we head into our conference today and as we head into our new school year. First reminder is high-level thinkers don't magically emerge from low-level thinking spaces. I would also like to invite you to remember that in our hearts, we know that the best learning experiences are hands-on and they're applied. They're often immersed in real-world contexts. We know that true deep learning is rarely linear, and it's almost never neatly organized by chapters and sections. We also know that authentic, powerful learning rarely takes the form of a worksheet or an end-of-chapter review problem or multiple-choice quiz. So we've got some decisions to make as individual educators, but also as school systems and as state systems, right? In other words, do we really just want students who are recipients of pre-made, pre-packaged information like our curriculum and our pacing guides and that online software that we bought that just gets delivered to kids and they just consume it and regurgitate it back? Or do we want bakers? Do we want makers? Do we want creators and doers who are actively engaged in their learning and doing awesome things that hopefully make a difference in the world, like the examples I showed you from Colorado? And if we want that, then how do we make sure that happens for every kid? What do we want all of our students to be, not just some? And more importantly, what are we willing to do to get them? I've been working with another school district in Virginia, and I keep asking them, how much content are you willing to give up for your new graduate profile? And they are struggling with that question. They know they want this. They're having a lot of trouble giving up the traditional whatever. Our biggest barrier to change in schools is not testing or funding or outside mandates, whatever. It's our deeply, deeply rooted mindset of what school should look like. You can go up to any person on the street in any community anywhere, and you can just say the word, psst, school. And as soon as you say that word, a whole host of images come into people's minds. Bell schedules, desks, something up front that displays information, transmission out and regurgitation back, right? Siloed subject areas, and so on. We have these deeply embedded mindsets of what school should look like that look nothing like the examples that I gave you. Nobody in this room would argue that those kids weren't learning powerful things in Colorado, but it sure didn't look like school as we traditionally think about it. And those deeply embedded mindsets go down hard. My most shared tweet of all time is this one. We want student learning to change, but we don't want to change our teaching, and we don't want to change how we do school. Good luck with that. Here's the thing. As long as our fears, our control needs, our assumptions about what school should look like, this historical inertia that's built up decade after decade, and all the yes buts that are in your heads right now. Scott, you're cool. Thank you. But, right, I can just hear now. As long as those things are heavier than your new visions of student learning, you're never going to get there. You got to figure out how to tip the balance. You got to figure out how to move from a yes but mindset to a why not and how can we. So we're emerging out of the pandemic, and we got an opportunity, despite the learning loss rhetoric. And the opportunity is this. We can start over at any time. We can start over in our own classroom. We can start over in our school systems. We can start over in our region with our partners. And we've got to figure out, what do we want to make happen? I'm going to invite all of you today at this conference and over the next couple years in school to really think hard about what kind of learning do you want to make happen for kids? How do we use technology to help with that? And how do we make sure that every kid gets it? And I think that's a worthwhile goal, worth fighting for, and I hope that you'll join me in that work. Thank you very much, friends. Resources are there. Have a great day. Be well.